Good evening. I'm Ted Carroll, and this is Schubert's Pond, Season 4. Here in Rye, we've had an environmental controversy for going on 5 years now. Down on Milton Point, there was formerly a swamp on Forest Avenue. It was converted into a beautiful wetland garden, and today that wetland garden is ruined. Tonight we will talk to some experts on the subject matter, review some of the material that is in front of our politicians at City Hall, and try and shed some light on why it's taken so long to reverse this situation. At my left is Chuck Pateman. Chuck is a land use expert, construction expert, well known in Westchester County. Chuck, maybe you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Good evening, Ted. It's a pleasure to be here with you tonight. I am born in Westchester County in the river towns, Irvington, New York. I've been active in building and construction my entire working life. Actually, I did my first subdivision when I was 22 years old. I've served on the Zoning Board of Appeals in the village of Tarrytown. I'm on the board of directors of the Westchester County Building and Realty Institute, and have followed Westchester government and our local governments quite closely. Haven't been to this side of the county too often, as I've always been very busy in the river town. So my career has pretty much been the Dobbs Ferry, Irvington, Tarrytown end. But became acquainted with the Schuberts through a mutual friend, and I'm very fond of them, and we'll work right to the end with them on this project for sure.
Excellent. So when the Schuberts built their home, I was initially concerned that the entire area would be degraded. But I was delighted to see it was anything but. The wetland gardens became locally famous and regionally famous. In the summer of 2006, however, their upstream neighbor, the Gateses, undertook a construction project in their backyard. And Mr. Schubert, seeing that and realizing that it would be potentially a threat to the swamp, now the pond, contacted City Hall, wrote a letter, asked them to look into it, asked them to be careful. He was given assurances immediately by the city employees that all appropriate permits had been obtained and that there would be no consequential damage to his wetland gardens. Within a few weeks, Mr. Schubert's water supply disappeared. Thus began a long, controversial process where Mr. Schubert asked the city fathers to give him the protection he felt he deserved for his property. He did that in many ways, visiting City Hall multiple times, meeting personally, one-on-one, with people in engineering and construction and in the administration of the city. He got a lot of runaround and no significant progress. He then started coming to city council meetings. Probably 2007 was when he began his most frequent visits, all the way through 2008 and into 2009. The visits were contentious at many times. He simply would not be quiet about the issue. He insisted that his rights be protected. The city allowed him to speak, but would not give him satisfaction of investigating the matter properly. It claimed that all appropriate permits had been obtained. In the spring of 2009, Mr. Schubert, after a visit to City Hall, being rebuffed, visited local politician Nita Lowy. She was not in her White Plains office, but at that point, Ms. Lowy's representatives insisted on placing a call to city manager of the time, Paul Shue. Mr. Shue got on the phone with Mr. Schubert, explained to him that nothing could be done. When Mr. Schubert got home after that visit, he got a call from the Westchester County Crisis Center. They wanted to come by and ascertain his sanity. Thus began another trauma situation with the Schuberts. Ultimately, Mr. Schubert was deemed to be more than sane. He was deemed to be very much in control of his own mind. He continued to meet with the city council regularly until in 2009 he could see no progress and was forced to sue the city and his neighbors to put the matter, instead of in the administration's hands, into the hands of the court system. This is something he deeply did not want to do, thus all the years of visiting City Hall. That brings us to the election of 2009. And in that election, Mayor Steve Otis, who led the council during the period of Schubert's Pond's problems, was defeated after running for his third term. This ushered in Doug French and a whole new slate in an election landslide. Many voters cite the previous council's treatment of environmental matters as one of the reasons the Otis administration got so few votes. In 2010, Mr. French and his slate were sworn in January 1st. Soon thereafter, members of that team had private conversations with Mr. Schubert and his supporters, telling him, in so many words, this matter was going to be resolved and quickly. In both January and February, no further messages or progress was essentially made. In that era, actually in late 2009, Mr. Pateman got involved with the Schuberts and his supporters, and Mr. Pateman's views on this matter were very much expert. Mr. Pateman suggested that the proper legal procedure would be to file a request that the Rye City Planning Commission review the matter. And he did so on behalf of the Schuberts in early March of 2010. That matter was received by the Planning Commission, but on the advice of council, not acted on. And so tonight, to start off our new season here, that is the subject that we'd like to talk to Mr. Pateman about. Chuck, is that a fair summary I've given of the Schubert matter as you know it?
Absolutely is, Ted. I'm just going to recap a few of the things that you said. It really started in June when the neighbors did some test holes in their property, and Bob Schubert recognized that and sent a letter to the city. This was really before the project began. And there was not an assurance that they had obtained all the permit. The city told the Gates that they didn't require any permits. And that is simply not a fact. The Gates property is in a wetland. That is documented. In fact, it was documented by the Gates, who had a wetlands delineation report prepared by a professional wetlands consultant in 2005 prior to this project. It was also documented by the city naturalist. The city was aware of that. The property was also in a floodplain, and a floodplain permit is required whenever there is the disturbance of any land or any excavation. A surface water and erosion control permit is required whenever there is any disturbance of land of any kind, and in this project required the excavation of approximately 300 linear feet of trench and 160 cubic yards of material. So it certainly required a surface water and erosion control permit. So despite the fact that the city said no permits required, it's undisputable these permits were required. Mr. Schubert's frustration is understandable. a clear look at the codes would make that clear.
And that, Chuck, is what essentially your March 5th submission to the city in great detail lays out. I don't know, what is it? It's 20 pages long.
I believe it's 24 pages with 29 exhibits. And this really, my strategy with regards to this report is during many of the city council meetings, I sat down and reviewed, I watched the tapes of this matter over a period of 4 years and reviewed the minutes. And Councilman Sack, who was on the previous council, seemed to understand clearly what happened here. The rest of the council seemed to want to cover this up, but Councilman Sack had a pretty good knowledge of what was going on. As a matter of fact, during one meeting, he called for an investigation and actually moved that the council investigate this matter to come to a final conclusion of what happened. And his statement, I believe the exact statement was, someone here isn't telling us the truth, referring to city staff. And there's no question about that when they said that we didn't need a surface water erosion control permit. And I'm telling you exactly how it is. I'm very familiar with the codes. This is what I've done for a living for 44 years. So what we did with this book is pretty much do that investigation for the city.
This book is your report that I'm referring to.
This book is the investigation that was asked for by Mr. Sack.
You've got all the exhibits there. I don't have them, but wow,
it's
that looks great,
all of the
Chuck.
codes underlined, highlighted, and if anyone would read this, residents of City Rye, the Planning Commission, the City Council would take the time to just read this, which might take them 2 hours. It's very clear what happened here.
Did they all get a copy or just the Planning Commission members?
We submitted 18 copies and we emailed this to every member of the City Council and referred to the exhibits that were available in City Hall. So everyone has seen this. We filed it. We gave the appropriate fee to the Planning Commissioner. On the front of the book, it's stamped as received March 8, 2010 by the city planner. We anticipated being on the next regularly scheduled agenda of the Planning Commission, and we're prepared to be there. And the night that the agenda is published, I received an email from the City Council that she was reviewing the matter for the Planning Commission.
The city's attorney.
The city's attorney. And she was reviewing the matter and would advise if and when we would be on the Planning Commission. I immediately responded that the matter had been accepted. I could see no reason as to why we would not be heard. Certainly, I would think the Wetlands Commission would want to know. They are charged with protecting the wetlands of the city of Rye, and this is clearly a wetland. Finally, we were forced to file an Article 78 proceeding, again, against the city, which they are defending, compelling them to give us an appearance in front of the Planning Commission.
Chuck, an Article 78 is a lawsuit.
That is another lawsuit asking the city to please look at this matter, do what you're supposed to do. And why they would not look at this matter is beyond me. I mean, this is a resident of this city whose property has been destroyed, and I submit that it's been destroyed because the codes have not been followed.